Okay, welcome everyone. Today we are going to really focus on using our weather routing tools while we're offshore. My name is Nick Olson. Let's get into it. Let's start talking about how we're going to use PredictWind to keep ourselves safe while we do the Atlantic crossing. So I'm going to jump straight into a screen share. The first thing we're going to talk about is polars. We'll come back to this. This will be our big picture stuff before we embark on our passage. But we'll come down here to weather routing, sail routing, and then straight in here to routing preferences. Now, we are going to be doing this on my Mac. I'm on the web page, so on the web browser. The process is the same if you're using a tablet. And especially once we get into the Offshore App, I will talk about using an iPad or an Android tablet at the same time. So in case you didn't watch last week's webinar, we have two main sources of how you can get PredictWind. One is the PredictWind app, but we really only use that when we've got a solid web connection. So, at the marina, at home, or, attached, when we're on our phone, on the cell network. The rest of the time, when we're offshore, we use the Offshore app. So you can use the Offshore app on your computer, so PC or Mac, or on an iPad, iPhone, Android tablet, like a Samsung tablet or phone. So here we are in routing preferences. So weather the polars are how fast our boat is expected to go in any given conditions. So what I mean by that is how fast does it go upwind or downwind in 15 knots of wind and 12 knots of wind and 8 knots of wind. And that is our performance polar for our boat. And then we have another element that we bring into that, which is our wave routing, which is modeled off our boat. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But at the moment, we're just going to focus on our performance polar, or not performance, and look at how we do that. So you'll see here we have boat type. And so this is where we're going to come to first. And I'm on predefined. Over here, we also have the AI polar. There were some people that have been asking about the AI polar and the data hub. The data hub is what you need to do the AI polar. What the AI polar is you'll start with your base polar. Say you had this predefined polar here, and the data hub will feed data back to your NMEA data back to our servers, and it will update your polar. And it's not just randomly doing that. It is using a very clever algorithm and learning as it goes, learning about your boat and how it sails. It knows when you're sailing, knows when you're motoring, it knows when it's nighttime and daytime, and it's putting all those factors in there and improving your polar all the time. So it's definitely the best way to do your polar is with the data hub and the AI polar, but we don't have to have that. We can use a predefined or advanced and adjust our polar. The reason I'm talking about polars this much is that it is very important that we know where you're going to be in 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 10 days. Think about if you have some small errors in there compounding over that time. And so we want to be able to plan ahead. And so the more accurate our polars are within the forecasts, the more accurately we can see where we're going to be and position ourselves for the weather. So predefined, this is a list of boats. We can choose our vessel in here. If your vessel is not listed in here, we do have some generic ones up the top here. Or you can choose a polar that that your boat has a similar performance to. So I might know that my custom boat you know, has a similar performance to, I don't know, any boat in here, a FAR 50, for instance. You know, I know that my custom, you know, 47 footer goes about the same speed as a FAR 50 or some other production boat that you know that you're pretty close to. So you choose that one. This is definitely the best way to do it. I'd recommend this over using the sail polar. The sail polar is very basic, at least if you're doing it this way. Choosing one that's similar to your boat, or choosing your boat, then you can adjust your polar. So I think I had a Swan 58. I've run a route for that in the Offshore App, so I want to keep it the same. So I've got that selected there. That's my predefined polar. As I said, we do have the sail option, very basic polar. I would recommend trying to use the predefined. The sail polar is just your maximum boat speed and 15 knots of wind and moderate waves. And so upwind at 50 degrees, reaching at 90 and downwind at 160, what speed do you go? If you've got a really heavy displacement boat and you know that it basically only does this speed no matter what, that's fine, and then it will scale down from 15 knots. But we're going to use the predefined, and we're actually going to copy it to the advanced polar. So we've now taken that predefined polar, we've copied it across to the advanced polar. And this is how we would start our AI polars. And we come across here, and you can see we have this list. True wind speed is in this column here. So we've got 6 to 20 knots. This, you know, we could add another column in here. I could press plus and we could put another row in, sorry. So we could have a higher wind speed. But this is what this predefined polar is. And this is why it's good to come and look at them, because then you can see how fast the software is expecting your boat to go in any of these conditions. So at 120 degrees true wind angle and 14 knots of wind, 10.49 knots. So does your boat go that fast? Do you sail your boat that fast? So we can adjust these numbers and it would adjust our polar. I'm not going to adjust them because I'll be here all day. But if you know your boat, you can look at the routing outputs and you can come back and adjust this stuff. So let's leave that there. Now, so the next thing that is going to change the speed of our boat is the wave. So we can calculate the wave drag of your vessel, and also we calculate how the wave affects your boat. So roll, vertical acceleration, and boat slamming. So I've got this is turned on. So there, if I turn it off, it all disappears. So turn it on. These numbers here are set from my predefined boat dimensions. If I'm on advanced, I can change these. So if you carry a lot more gear on your boat that compared to what the design has, which most will, you can increase this displacement. We want your waterline, your beam, and your draft. And if you have a catamaran power monohull, we're going to do power cats as well. So we need to choose our boat type. Here's a picture of what we're looking for: the displacement, waterline length, beam, and hull draft, not your keel draft. I just need to move my zoom controls more. So we've got that set. That is going to create a basic 3D model of our hull, and that's going to be used with the wind wave, the primary swell, secondary swell, and tertiary swell from the wave modeling. And it's going to see whether we're being slowed down by the wave, sped up by the wave, and how much roll, vertical acceleration, and boat slamming we will experience throughout the route. Our route defaults, obviously for an Atlantic crossing, not the biggest deal in the world, but any coastal passages, we want to have the depth avoidance set. It uses a seafloor contour to avoid as our boundary for the router rather than the land. Just gives you more accurate routes. Our tidal and ocean currents, this is what ocean currents are going to be used in calculating our route. Depending on where we are in the world, it's more important in some places than the other. But yeah, you can select which current model is used in your routing. We'll leave it on Mercator. Ignore the advanced routing adjustments. You don't need to know about that. It's a yacht racing thing. Other things we have up here, tack and jibe penalties. Again, we can ignore that. And our polar speed adjustment. At night, we can assume that we're going to sail slower. We might sail more conservatively. As in, you know, we don't want to take risks at night with, you know, having too much sail up. In general, we could actually scale our base polar with these polar speed adjustments. So we can change this in the Offshore App, and we'll look at that later. So we've set up our polar, and we can come over here and run our route. So we have our green start waypoint and our red end waypoint. If I move one of those, you'll see that the lat long comes up. I can click on this icon up here, this waypoint icon. And when I move these, the lat long will move. So important to have these in the water, not on land. The router will try and take it off land if it is on there, but it's just, you know, general rule of thumb, make sure you put it in the water. So why this is important is that while we're underway, depending on what system we're using, we may have to put our lat long in here for where we are at the time before we run our route. If you have a GPS enabled device, you can click on that button there. I'm not going to do it because I'm in New Zealand, and it will take you to where you are. So if you have an iPad that has GPS in it, it can take you to it. You might want to cross-check that on your chart plotter, that that's the right position to run your route from. We can add waypoints in here as well. If in particular, for this Atlantic crossing route, we wanted to follow the traditional route. You know, we wanted to force the router to go south. We could do that. So we could add another waypoint in, and we could set a position for that. I can also make that waypoint into a port or starboard rounding. In this case, it would be a starboard rounding. Yes. And yeah, and we can have that there. Anyway, I'm going to let the router do what it does. I'm going to take that waypoint out because I want the router to give me the fastest route. Okay, so I'm going to click on download. Actually, no, before I do that, I'm going to look at my start time. I'm in Auckland. I can actually adjust this to the Canaries if I wanted to. But for simplicity of myself, and for not confusing me where I am, I'm just going to leave it on Auckland time. It is going to route it for 24 hours from now because I've set it a day ahead. So I had the calendar here. In fact, I've got 2 days ahead. If I go the 20th, which is tomorrow here in New Zealand, then I'm actually going to start routing 24 hours from now. Why that's good is that we might run our departure planning, and we might want to look at a route in 2 days' time or similar. So I can run the route in there. I'm not going to look at the routing in here too much longer because I want to go into the Offshore app and look in there. But we'll calculate our route there and we'll briefly have a look at it. And then we will move on. So what this is doing at the moment is it's looking at every possible route that I could take. I've got it set to give me the fastest route. The reason I want to do that is that A, I want to get there, but B, I will make decisions about the sea state, the wind along my way. I'll use my seamanship to decide whether I want to avoid something, and then I might put a waypoint in or a boundary in to avoid that. But I just want it to give me the fastest route. I can set the routing algorithm to avoid certain conditions, but that is going to affect my route a lot. So I would prefer to just have the fastest route and then make my decisions from that. So the first thing that catches my eye here is this little warning, and I'm on the PWG model. So that's the blue route. If I zoom in a bit and I click on that, you'll see it is a warning, a roll warning. That means it's above our 4-degree RMS threshold, and it's covering this part of the route. So I could get warnings for wind against current, wind chill, thunderstorms, roll, vertical acceleration, boat slamming. So there's a lot of warnings that could pop up, and the beauty of it is that you may not, if you're missing something, you haven't noticed that might occur, this gives you the heads up to go and have a look. So you'll see if I change over to another model and change to the ECMWF from the PWG, and you'll see there this route's slightly further north, and it is warning me of vertical acceleration and roll for that part of the journey. So we might look at this more when we're in the Offshore app, but we can dig right into that. We might need to go back and run a departure plan and see if we left today or in 3 days' time, would it be better? So actually, let's just quickly do that, because ideally, if we could avoid those conditions before we start, that would be a good idea. There might be other factors to consider. It might be worth riding that period of time out. We would also want to look at how bad it is. Is the roll at 4.5 degrees, or is it at 6, or 8? That's what we might want to consider. So if I just run the departure planner, it will really quickly tell me whether, if I left today, tomorrow, the next day, which one might be better. So you see there, we are getting warnings across all of these. And if I come down here, so you see here, I have departure 1, departure 2, departure 3, departure 4. The time upwind. So all of them are pretty good, right? For reaching time downwind, that's what we want to do. We're not here to sail upwind. Our average wind speed across the passage. So, 8 to 20 knots. So all of them look pretty good. So we just need to work out where this, if one of them has better or worse for roll. So, and you can see that already. So here we are in time with 4 degrees or less of roll, and day 4, departure 4, has none above it. So that's what we don't want this. We don't want this 7%, 11%, 8%. That's going to be uncomfortable. As I said before, we can go into the routing and have a look at it and see whether it's really bad, but it's definitely something we want to consider. So, maybe leaving in 4 days' time is better. And you can see here our polar percentage. That's when I was saying before about the the wave's speeding us up or slowing us down. It is actually speeding us up most of the time because we've got a downwind passage. Right, I'm going to, oh, actually, before I leave this, so something that we want to set up in here is our GPS tracking. So knowing where other people are out on the water, if you're in a rally, is very nice. You can see it in the Offshore app. You can download it on your Iridium Go, on your Iridium Go exec, on your Starlink. You can download all the positions of everyone else, see where they are, see their blog posts. It's not sometimes nice to know that other people are, you know, in the same situation as you. Maybe they've got a couple of sick people on board too, or whatever. It's just nice to know there's other people out there able to see them. Can also be used in an emergency situation if need be. Is some, you know, this boat needs this medication, who's near there. So yeah, worth enabling it and worth having it and using it. So if you're an event that's using YB trackers, you can view that event in there. If I click on YB events, what have I got here? I've got the Transpac. Come in there and you can select whichever event you're looking at. We don't have them added in there too far in advance because we need YB to set them up. But for most of you, you can create a friend group, or if you are in a rally, you can select that rally and it will show up. So I've got the Atlantic posse here, set up by my friend Dietmar, who does the Panama posse. He's doing Atlantic rally this year. So I've got that one there set up, and I can select whichever. If I had some buddy boats, if I had 4 or 5 buddy boats, I can set up a group with them, and we can all see each other, and I can choose which rally I'm part of in here. But if it is a rally like the Atlantic posse, you will need to be added to that rally initially by the PredictWind admin. So that would be a PredictWind support thing. And we'll just actually choose one that I should be able to see some boats on when I'm in the Offshore app. So I will now leave that. Something else that we will look at in the Offshore app is the AIS data. Many of you may not be aware that we have full AIS data in PredictWind. So if you have an upgraded account, you can actually see all the traffic out on the water, and you'll see these boats here with the little sail icons. They're actually boats that are tracking with PredictWind, but we'll see this one here. We can also see he's on AIS. So if I click on him, he can we can see where he is, and we would also be able to see him on the AIS. Okay, so I will stop sharing the screen, and we are going to go into the Offshore app. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the Offshore app is really what we want to use when we're offshore. It's not, doesn't matter which SATCOMs we're using, I recommend using this piece of software. The reason for that is that this piece of software saves everything offline. So the PredictWind app forecast website does not save your data offline. The Offshore app does. So we can download all our data, we can disconnect, and we can come back and have a look at it. I'll just have a quick drink. So again, just like before, I've run our weather out here, and we're going to go through how we set this all up. So where should I start? Yeah, so same as before, we have our start and finish waypoints. There are some, and we can set them with the lat long there if we want to. If we have an Iridium Go, there'll be a little white dot on the screen, and you can just position your start waypoint on the little white dot of where you are. Or we can use the GPS to go to where we are, or we can add the lat long. Let's close that. So there's a few things that we can do here that we need to be aware of right from the outset. So if I click on this GRIB button up here, you'll see that I have these lines on the screen. So what the small boxes are high resolution GRIB areas. The really small boxes are 1 kilometer resolution areas. In this big white box here, we can adjust this big white box. So this is our GRIB area. So we can change that, and that's going to change our file size to download. So this is particularly important if you are on basically any sat system other than Starlink. On your Starlink, you've got full speed. You can get as big an area as you want. I'm not saying that that's actually going to give you any better results, because what we're doing here is actually very, very good. So we on any comms device. And now, so just to clarify, when I say any comms device, I do not mean an InReach Mini, Zoleo, or Bivy stick. They are what we call a short burst data device, and they are only good for sending text messages and GPS tracking. So good for that, but you cannot transfer GRIB files or weather routing. So I can adjust this area. For now, before we leave, we're going to get as much data as possible because we're in port. We're going to get everything we can. Once we're underway, we may get a smaller area like this. And you might go, oh, well, what about all this other stuff out here? Well, there's a couple of ways we can mitigate that. One, our weather routing is always going to be doing the whole route. So we're not exactly missing the data because it's calculated on the PredictWind servers. It is using as much data as it can get, and it is calculating your route, the entire route, using all of the highest resolution data available. So what we're really doing here, looking at this, is this is just our visual cues to along with our weather routing. So I can adjust this area. As I said, before we leave, we're going to get it as much as possible. Make this box nice and big. And that's my GRIB area. Then I can come over here to where it says download. I'm happy with my start, happy with my finish. I've got my GRIB area set. And I'll come over here to download. Just one other thing about this box. We can actually download a box somewhat like this if we want to see further in advance or a bigger area. And that might be a secondary download we would do if we were on an Iridium Go or an exec. And we would actually just change the parameters. So let's go and look at our parameters. So I click on this download button. If you're on your tablet, your iPad, it's just the green download button, and you tap on it and it opens this up, and it'll have GRIB preferences, weather routing preferences. That's where you're going to see these things. So up the top here, we have this little button, and we didn't used to have it, and it says use offshore optimized settings. And what that would actually do is change all of these settings to what we what works for an Iridium Go, for example. So well, at the moment, I'm actually not going to do that. We'll come back and do that later. So at the moment, I have my time step for my GRIBs set at 3 hourly. That is the actual model run steps. They're 3 hours apart. I can change this to 12 hourly. And so that means that each 12-hour step, I'm getting the actual forecast. The software here will interpolate between those time steps. And so we can look at any step through it. And to be fair, it is actually pretty hard to distinguish between a 12-hourly time step and the 3-hourly. Times when you will see it is if there is a front moving through, so a rain band, you might see the timing of that, you know, if it stalls in the modeling, and the software wouldn't necessarily show that. But for what we're looking at here, because our weather routing is using the smallest time step it can, it doesn't matter for our visual and our GRIB. That doesn't matter to what we're looking at. 10 days, I'm doing a big passage. I mean, I'll flick this back to 3 hourly because we're in the doc. We're going to get as much information as we can. I've got all the models selected here. My resolution, I could go to the high resolution, but I really don't see the point for my big passage. Anywhere coastal, I would 100% want to do this. You'll see down here, I've got my file size, 79 megabytes. If I click on that high resolution, 556. So you see it's a lot of data. I could get that now, but I don't really need to. All my models, these are my weather models. I've got all of them selected because I can, you know, I've got unlimited data at the moment. My parameters here, wind, pressure, rain, wave, gust, cape. So this is just all the parameters, that the GRIB parameters that we're going to download, assuming they're in that model. So that's our GRIB settings. So that for what we're going to download in the GRIB files. That does not influence our weather routing. So if I come down here, I'm in this weather routing and departure planning, and I can click on this little icon here. This is the settings wheel. If I click on that, that's the same as if I clicked on weather routing preferences in the Offshore app on a tablet. And you'll see here we have these, all the things that we looked at before. We have our polar speed adjustment, so really handy that we can adjust this while we're on the boat. We can change our boat type. If you want to set up your advanced polar, we do need to do that back where we were before in the PredictWind app or website, sorry. Motoring, something I didn't mention before. We will motor at 5 knots when the boat speed is less than 4.5 knots. So basically we're sailing, the speed falls down, and we're going to go, yep, let's turn the motor on and motor for a while. So we've got that turned on. Wave polar, my wave polar is set up. We do need to set that up like we did before in forecast, the forecast website. We have depth avoidance here. Again, what we looked at before, and we can change our tidal and ocean currents for our routing. I could turn on the comfort settings, which I mentioned before. I don't want to use the comfort settings because I want to use my seamanship to decide whether I want to avoid a wave state, a wind state. So if I did click on that, you'll see it opens up this area here where I can avoid wind speeds and combined swells heights. I'm going to turn it off. Okay, so we're in here. We're happy with all those settings. They're basically the same as what we set up before. I'm going to click on the X there. So far we've got our GRIB set up. got our weather routing set up. GMDSS, we 100% want this. This is, especially this GMDS graphical, that is the images that are going to show, you know, what the GMDSS text forecast says. So again, visual cues. Something I should have mentioned up here is our connection type. So depending on what connection type you are on, you will need to select this here. So whether I'm on Iridium Go, Go Exec, Optimizer, Global Star, SAT, or email request. Email request would be if you're on SSB and you want to send off emails with your GRIB and weather routing requests. I'm on the web, so we'll use the web. Just on that, well, we'll talk about that when we do the download. So observations, I can get some observations from Waveboys. There's probably not too many for our route. We're not going to worry about that for the moment. Next, so I can, and I especially want to do this before I leave, I can get all this ocean current. So if I turn that off, if I unclick that, you'll see my file size changes dramatically. You know, there's 50 megabytes of data in there. So let's turn it on, let's get them all. The good thing about ocean currents is they do not change as fast as atmospheric data. So all our wind, rain, you know, gusts, that changes a lot quicker than our currents and than our ocean data. Satellite imagery. If there was something in particular we wanted to keep an eye on, you know, a system that had formed and we wanted to watch it, we could get that. I'm not a huge fan of it because I feel like it's covered by the GMDSS, but you know, you do what suits you. You will find what works for you in this process. So here is our GPS tracking that we set up before, or YB events, so whichever one you're doing, and also our AIS data. So that AIS data is going to show us from our green start waypoint. It's going to show us any traffic that's showing up on the AIS within 300 nautical miles. So that's using the satellite AIS and terrestrial to see that. And that's we use that obviously not at the same as our AIS that we have on board, where we can see roughly 30 nautical miles. This is a you know, a future planning thing. Do we want to avoid a fishing fleet? Are we going to go through a high traffic zone at some stage? And do we need to prepare for that? So that's what we're using that AIS data for there. I'm going to click on next and see here, it tells me my RTOFS global currents are too big. So that's the GRIB area that we looked at before. The area I selected is too big for those currents. So that's okay, that's fine, we don't mind. And see here, I've got this little error, this little triangle. You ever see one of these in here? Click on it and it tells you what the problem is. So you might get, if you get some of those pop up, it might say you've got a password problem or whatever. It will tell you what the problem is. So I'm going to click on download all. You can see here, it tells me up the top on my web connection. If I was on let's move that zoom control. If I was on a different connection, say an Iridium Go Exec, I'd need to come up here and select that Wi-Fi to be connected to. When you're offshore, that's pretty easy because you're generally always connected to it. So you'll see here, it's downloading all our files. And this little piece of information over here is important to know. This is when the GRIB was updated. So you'll see here, this is in the time zone of my computer. So because when we're crossing oceans, we might be going across multiple time zones. Sometimes it's easy to just stay in the time zone that your device is in. So you have your own reference, or you might change it, but that's up to you. But it is in the time zone of your device in here. And so I can see here that the PWG updated at 5 o'clock this morning. The wave updated at 5:30. The ECMWF updated at 8 a.m. The Spire updated at 9:25, GFS at 6:15. And it's important to see this stuff because sometimes, GFS or UKMO, they might have a problem with their computer model run. And so this can be delayed, or you might see that this is a day old and you'll go, okay, so that GRIB is a day old. I'm going to discount that data because it's old data. So the currents update less often, but that's fine. As I say, they don't change a lot. We've got our GMDSS bulletins and our GMDSS graphical. We've got our GPS tracking and our AIS. So you see there, my GPS tracking data is reasonably big. That's because I hadn't downloaded it before on here. The next time I did that, that would actually be really small. So download your GPS tracking before you leave, so it's all up to date, and then incrementally it's just a little file size. Speaking of file sizes, these are all my file sizes over here. You'll see that they're quite big. Well, these ones down here are small. They're all kilobytes, and that's what we'll need for our next download. So we've got our weather route. That again, that was small, 28.6 kilobytes. So very, very small, but there's a huge amount of data in that weather route. And that's what is good about this is that you're sending off that position to our service. It's crunching, 70 megabytes of data, and then it sends this little packet of data back, which is only 28 kilobytes. We've got everything there. We'll close that. And I am in the tables, or graphs and tables. And so you'll see here we have our entire passage with our wind speeds. As we saw in our departure planning before, there was nothing really extreme with the wind speeds. And we can see this for the entire route here, over 10 days, that there's nothing super extreme. We have this little pop up here in the blue, which is the PWG, and the PWE, which is red. But in general, the consensus across the models, for our route is pretty good. So that's a positive sign that they're not really spread apart. That's our first sort of indicator that looks good. Direction. I mean, I'd like to look at this stuff for the next 12, 24 hours in particular. We can run the route through and look at stuff further in the future. But I like to look at this for the short term. What do we need to plan for? Are we going to need a sail change? That sort of thing. Come down here, rain and Cape. Do we want to see them? If we see them together, we might want to think about thunderstorms. That's a long way in the future. We're going to keep updating our route between now and then. So we can keep looking at that in the future. But something we might want to keep an eye on, if it was really, really bad, we might want to slow our boat down and let a system go in front of us or something like that, or try and get in front of it. So something we would consider if there was some particularly bad weather. Oh, that's a beautiful thing. The temperature goes up as we cross the Atlantic. Pressure. Is the pressure now in the models matching up to your barometer on board? Another indicator of, hey, the models are matching up with what I see. Now, our wave height, this is combined wind wave and swell. And you'll see it does increase here around the 23rd. So let's roll down here and look at our roll. So you'll see here at around the 23rd where we saw that that spike in the combined wind wave and swell. We also see our roll go up. So this is what we were looking at before, the roll in RMS. So this is calculated from our boat parameters, our hull shape, our boat type, our displacement, and we have put that 3D model in there, and it is looking at the the wind wave, the primary swell, secondary swell, and tertiary swell. Sometimes there's not a secondary or tertiary swell, but if it's there in the modeling, it will use it to calculate how your boat's going to react. So anything above 4 degrees RMS, we consider to be difficult to move around the boat and more unsafe. So we do go up to 5. It is for a, I guess a 24-hour period, maybe. We can actually look at this in the wave tab as well. So would we want to avoid this? As we looked at before at our departure planning, perhaps we could leave later, we would avoid this altogether. Or we might go, okay, we understand it, it's going to be rough, but we're just going to, change our safety protocol on board. So this is, for real. This is not, made up. This is, you would want to consider this. This is your safety. If you're going to knowingly sail into these conditions where this has gone above that threshold, so from about any time here above this 3.5, 4, you need to think about how you're going to sail your boat. What safety protocols do we have on board? How are we going to sail it? Like, maybe we don't necessarily sail to where the router wants us to go. Maybe we sail at a nicer angle. We don't want to have a crash jibe. We need to start thinking about this information. We could go back up the top and look at what wind angles we're going to have during this period and decide, is this something we want to take on? So something else to consider is before that and during that time, our vertical acceleration is up. So again, do we want to take that on? Or do we not have a choice? That's fine, but we can just choose how we sail our boat. You might want to consider this 0.2. That's where it's hard to perform tasks on board. People are more likely to get seasick. So, you're in not very nice rolly conditions. You've got people that are seasick, something to consider. Boat slamming, basically we've got nothing there, so we can not worry about that. But yeah, let's just quickly come back up to the 23rd and look at our true wind angle. So it may not be too bad because it's somewhat on the beam so far as, but then if we've got a lot of roll and it's on the beam, maybe we want to run flatter, but not too flat. We don't want to, maybe we want to, go with it a bit more. So start of planning to think, looking at our tools and what we think. So there's a summary of our route. Our passage time, our motoring time, maximum wind speed and gust, cape, the time reaching, time downwind. And that's the differences there are the models. And again, we can see our roll and vertical acceleration. This wind tab over here, we can look at this for our short term. The wind speeds, we're obviously motoring at the start there, and that's what this little thing means. And then here's our warnings down here, our warnings. And so they're all roughly around the same time across the models. We can click on it, tells us what it is. So same as in the graphs, we can look at our vertical acceleration and roll. And so the reason, I don't want to go on about this too much more, but the reason that we want to look in here is I can look at each model, but what I wanted to show you was where we get these warnings. Why are we getting them? So we've got our roll and our vertical acceleration, but this is our this is our combined wind wave. This is our wind wave, and this is our primary swell, secondary swell, and tertiary swell. And you can see they're different directions, especially here, the wind wave and the primary swell are different directions. So that's probably what's giving us such a rolly time. And, we have different periods and things like that. So that's what is creating those conditions. So we're aware of them. We know that they're there. I need to come back over here to the map. There's a lot that we can look at in the maps. So I come up here, flick over to the ECMWF, and I am on CAPE, convective available potential energy. I didn't see any warnings for thunderstorms. We did see later in our passage, we saw some CAPE levels and rain together. Let's just run that through, something we might want to consider. So you'll see here, we run out of our 10 days of GRIB data. And so this is where the route is actually going to be calculated on the ECMWF ensemble. So from this point on, once we run out of our 10 days, we're actually the routing. So you'll see the routing still going. That's because it's using the ECMWF ensemble to calculate the rest of our route. So I don't see anything too nasty there anyway, but this is something we would want to, that's a long time away. So we would want to keep looking at that. We have our wind. So this is our average wind speed. And we can see that if we come along here and about here, so we don't get high wind speeds on our passage, but this is where we have this warning for the vertical acceleration in the roll. And what it is it's this system up here has thrown this swell down here. Let's have a look at the wave. And so it's thrown that swell down there, different swell directions as it's spun. And so that's what's given us the C state, which is going to make our trip a bit more uncomfortable. Or we leave it a different time and avoid it altogether. Always worth having a look at the gust. Obviously, what we're looking at in the wind is average wind speed. When you look at the gust, it can make a passage look quite different to what it looked like before. If I come down here, I zoom in, I can actually click anywhere on my route and it will give me all the information for that point. You'll see here at this point in the route, the wind speed is 12 knots, gust to 16.6, the direction true, our course, our expected boat speed, and the true wind angle, the current, waves. So that's the combined wind wave and swell, not what we're looking at in our wave routing, where we can actually look at all of those separately. And so we can just see where we are. So this is that point where we were looking at before, where perhaps if we are going to sail into this, do we really want, this on our beam? Would we actually put a waypoint down here, or once we get this, would we actually sail down here more and then run a new route? And before, all right, I'll close that. I'm just going to turn my AIS on. So I'll come back to my weather routing with my AIS on. So I've turned my AIS on. So let's just go back to where we were. And so what we're doing with this is we can see all this traffic. Depending on where you are in the world, you can see fishing fleets. You might be able to see other boats around you. Again, emergency situation could be a great thing. So that's why we have this AIS data. If we were going to come into a high traffic zone, maybe we have 2 people on watch that night, for instance, so that, or 3, depends on what, maybe we had 1 person on watch every 4 hours, but for that night we double up. because we're coming into a high traffic zone. Our GPS tracking, I must be set up in a different part of the world for my GPS tracking. But again, that's where we would see all our boats on the map. You'll see if I come up here to the GMDSS forecast, this is the text forecast. I have it on my weather route. I have all the GMDSS graphical forecasts here. And so, for instance, if we were halfway across this passage and we were here, we might really want to be thinking about what these systems down here are doing. Before we do another download, let's just have a look at our ocean data. So anywhere on the route, we can actually see what the current is. You'll see there is eddies out there. You might be wondering why, are we going to go into some nasty sea states, or why is it so bumpy today? These currents will help us tell. Obviously, if we're over in the east coast of the US, or if that's where you're heading, the Gulf Stream is knowing where that is, when you're going to hit it, how it's going to, how you're going to route around it. That's really important. So let's go back to our weather routing, and what we are going to do is we are going to do another download. We're going to pretend that we've sailed most of the way across the Atlantic. We're out here. Again, as I mentioned, we would want to look at what these systems are. I can click on them and it will tell me, it'll show me the GMDSS forecast, the text forecast written by a meteorologist. We're at sea. We have set out, this is where we're at, whether we set that with the lat long in here, or whether we had the white dot from our Iridium Go, or we used the GPS on our device. And so this is where we are. We've still got our destination here. We want to look at our GRIB area. And so this, what we're about to cover reasonably quickly, is this is what's important to those of you with your Iridium Goes and your execs and your sat phones, your SSBs. And from the survey that we ran at the start, that's a majority of you. So we've set that GRIB area. I could actually make this slightly smaller, but let's run with it for now, with it like this. And I will click on download, and we're going to come up here, and I'm going to click on this use offshore optimized settings. And you'll see a whole lot of these things will change. So, and at the same time, my file size went to 134.6 kilobytes. That's my estimated file size, but that is a perfectly acceptable file size for an Iridium Go. It's easy money for an exec. And so we could add some more stuff in here. I might go, oh, I want to see, I'm getting near the Caribbean. I want to see the Cape. And so I can add that parameter in there. I might chuck the gust in there too. You'll see that changed my estimated file size there. All our other settings that we had are the same as before. And I'm on weather routing. My start time is now. I've got my GMDSS because I want to look at what those systems down below me, those low pressure systems are doing. I'm going to click on next. You'll see the ocean data we haven't got that selected because that would be really big. If we're on our Starlink, we can get that. You see, all of a sudden, if I click that on, the file size goes exponentially bigger. They will still be in there. So if we don't replace something, so if we don't replace the ocean data, it's still in there within the time frame that we had that GRIB data for. I'm going to get the AIS and my GPS tracking because I want to know where everyone is. And I'm going to click next. So you'll see here, I have all my file sizes. We're all in kilobytes. We're nice and small. I'm going to download all. That would be perfectly acceptable file size for an Iridium Go or exec. Download all of these. See, it happens nice and quick. on my web connection, and my weather route is still crunching on the PredictWind servers, and that will come back in 10, 20 seconds, and we will have all our data in here. And so again, we can see our GRIB update times, and so there we all the way down here. GMDSS, obviously, that's just been calculated recently. Our GPS tracking is up to date. AIS is up to date. Back here into the tables, we can see all of our data in here. Let's click over to the map. So you can see this is our AIS around us. We do have vessels around us, not many. It's a big ocean out there. We've got the high pressure system up here. I have not got the wave data. So you see here it says no wave in GRIB, and that's what it is. That's exactly what it says. No wave in GRIB. So I need to change my parameter to wind. I've got wind. You'll see here we're running downwind. The models are really in agreement. This is now 11 o'clock. That's tonight. So I would have a new model run by then. So I would actually update this here, and we would run our weather routing again, get new GRIBs, get all the data, and run through our process of what we want to look at here. I will wrap up this here. Oh, one more thing before I do that. So I talked before about getting a bigger area. So sometimes if we were back here, we might want to get a bigger GRIB area. And so I can come in here, and you'll see it's got that big area. I should point out that as you move this, it changes that GRIB area. Often it can be a bit tall, but if I want to get a nice big area, I can set that area quite big. And I come over here and I click on download, and I can have obviously these offshore optimized settings, but you'll see we've got 395 kilobytes because we've got such a big area. What I can do is I could go, well, I'm going to go, I want to see a big picture for a long time. But I know that one of these models in particular, either the ECMWF or Spire, is really good long-term. Let's go with the ECMWF. And I turn all the other models off, and I don't necessarily need all of those other parameters. And so I've turned those parameters off, and you'll see there, it's 136 kilobytes. I can click on next again, and I've got all that stuff there. Download all. And I could have actually just downloaded that ECMWF rather than getting the new weather route. We've got those all updated now. So you'll see there, I've got my great big area, and I can then have a look at the big picture over a longer term. So with that, I will let Kieran tell me if there's something major I've missed. And I think I've got a little bit over time, but I'm happy with that. Well, thank you everyone for coming and joining us today. And please sail to the weather, be safe out there. And if you have any questions, come and ask the support team at PredictWind. Thank you.